Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel, Iambic Scribe, dedicated to all things writing. So I'm really excited about today's video. This is going to be the start of a series called How to Write Your Book, pretty standard title there. Today's video is Getting Started. So we're going to go through 5 basic steps for you guys. Obviously this is geared towards beginner writers, but even if you are more advanced, I hope that this will still be helpful for you. So by now I hope that you guys have also watched the videos that I've already put out. If I am referencing any of the videos in any of the slides, I will link them in the description or in the comments so that you can have that information and reference those videos that will be helpful in this topic today. So how to write your book, getting started. I'm going to be going over basically this outline. Let me just jump right into it before I dawdle. So step number 1 for you guys in how to write your book is to first establish a direction. So what I mean by direction is basically where you're going, right? So if we do not have a direction in our creative path, then we are probably going to kind of waver all over the place. We need a strong and consistent, reliable foundation. Otherwise, it is going to be prone to collapse, as I once put it. So the way that you can do this is if you are focusing on different things such as a message that you want to deliver, which I did reference in the very first video. I'll link that below so that you can reflect on what your message is. If you have a powerful message that you want to deliver to the world, right? If you have any kind of inspirational words or anything that you want them to know just in terms of truth and knowledge, try to ask yourself what that is, and therefore you're establishing a sense of purpose as well. Versus if you don't really have anything that you deem as powerful enough to say, you know, that might actually kind of lead to maybe just being discouraged, you know, like a lack of motivation. So establishing a direction means you can establish for yourself a sense of purpose in your writing or in your creativity. Again, thinking about what message you have for the world, what are you trying to say and why, as in why is this important to you, okay? So those are 2 different things you can think of when you are establishing any kind of a firm foundation and direction for your book. And again, a book is a very long process, and it is something that requires a lot of commitment. Think of if you have a powerful message or purpose or passion for whatever it is you're doing, think of this as the fuel that will never run out if your purpose and your passion and your message is strong enough. But if you feel that this needs some work, if you feel like maybe you don't quite have a powerful message, reflect on that. Reflect on what you really want to say and if it is important enough for you. So in my first video, I do reference themes. You know, do you have an important theme to put out there into the world? Like, what do you want to share with the world? Okay. Another thing to think about in terms of establishing a direction is a vision. So I know personally for myself, my book idea did start with a single vision in my mind where I saw a particular thing that I found very beautiful and profound and quite scary. And I've been developing this vision for the entire time, and it eventually came to be the idea for my book. So maybe you guys have seen a particular creative vision in your mind, develop that, which we will actually talk about later on, but this becomes your direction. Now, the simplest thing that you can do, and you might want to actually, I don't know if you want to do this first, it kind of just depends on your preference, but think about what kind of a project that you want to create. So some people, before they even start doing anything, they know, hands down, that they want to write a book. They know they want to write a fiction book, they know what genre, and they even have an idea of just any kind of details about this project or this sort of like just a step within their career even. Maybe you don't want to write a fiction book, maybe you want to write a memoir or an autobiography or even a self-help book, but this slideshow is probably more relevant to fiction. But think of what kind of a project you want to create, and again, what do you want to put out there into the world and why. So this right here, this is the direction. This is the firm foundation that you are going to need, and I speak from personal experience. If you don't have a good enough reason for doing this, it is probably not going to take flight in the way that you want it to. Yes, of course, you could still write the book, but it really won't be as a fulfilling experience, or it's going to be difficult to keep that fuel going. Okay, so after you've established a direction, that's where we move on to the next step. And interestingly, my next step is not talking about plot, but character. Okay, so step 2 is to begin to develop characters. So in step 1, I talked about vision. Maybe you already have a vision of a character, right? In their world, like whatever world they're in. And here, it could be character or characters, depending on, I guess, the strength of the first character. Maybe it's a love story, or maybe it's a sort of like a good versus evil story. So it just kind of depends on what character you resonate with the most. But the reason why I am putting this as the next step and not plot is because if you don't have a strong character, this human force, you don't have a plot. So every character, every good character, every memorable character has a motivation, okay? So character motivation, right? So basically it means something that they want. Every good character wants something within any creative work at all. And this right here, character motivation, that right there is your plot. Because if a character from the beginning of the story wants something, the readers are going to be rooting for this character the entire way through until they see that resolution, until they see that character get what they want. Now, added on to this, you're also going to have things like, of course, they're going to be met with obstacles along the way, which I'll talk about in the next step. But yes, your character or characters, they have to be real human forces, people who are not just flat cardboard cutouts, but basically emulating real life. And in a separate video, we will be talking extensively about how to develop characters. This here is just the first video in this series of how to write your book. So again, character motivation is your plot in itself. And one thing that I like to really phrase it as, instead of thinking about and really fixating on plot in itself and saying, okay, what happens? What happens in my book? What happens in my book? Instead, let the plot form around the character. Okay, so that is one thing that I will note down. So what I mean by this is allow your character to kind of be the, like, I guess the planet that everything else kind of orbits around, or you're just like molding the world based off of this character's journey, okay? So this could be true of a fiction character, or even if you are writing a memoir or you know, whatever, the main character, this is our, I guess, our hero, not always a hero, right? It's not always someone who's actually has hero attributes, but it is our main protagonist, okay? So let the world and the plot and the obstacles form around this character for the most part. Of course, you're gonna, you know, that can kind of just waver, and you have to be flexible with that. But if you are thinking about what the character wants and how badly do they want this. Now, as an example, we're talking about your passion for writing. In the world of the story, right? It's the same thing. It's the same thing. If your character does not have something that they want badly enough, we're probably not going to even follow this character at all. They have to want this so badly. So again, in separate videos, we'll talk about this, but I do want to mention something that I came across in my writing reference research that was very helpful to me. So in terms of motivation, a character either wants to run towards something or away from something. Okay, so I'll say to or away from. Okay, so when we think of motivation, we think of something that we desperately want, or we just really, really want for whatever reason. It doesn't have to be something healthy. It just has to be something that this character is urging towards, like they want to run towards this thing and get this no matter what. Or it's the opposite. They want to run away from something. So maybe it's they're running away. So they're going towards something they deem as positive or beneficial or pleasing, or they're running away from something that they deem as negative or harmful or scary, whatever the case is. If you look at any good movie or any good book, film, whatever, even like video games, whatever it is, this is going to be true. Okay. So that's just like a tip for you guys. I will go more into detail in a different video. But just think about that. What does your character want? And do they want it badly enough? Are they passionate enough or desperate enough or, earnest enough that the reader is going to follow them from the beginning of the book to the end of the book? Okay. So again, developing character or characters, they have to be real human forces. And so we'll go into the detail in the future. But I wanted you guys to be able to get started with that one, or at least start to kind of sift through your notes that you already have. Next step, now we're talking about plot. So this is where you're establishing a tentative plot. Okay, so plot is basically what happens in a story. So if you were to write down maybe a bullet point list, a sequence of events, that would basically be plot. If you were to look up any synopsis, summary, plot on things like Google, Wikipedia, whatever, of a story or movie, it's the sequence of events, a series of events, right? But when I say establish a tentative plot, so this is like your outline. So the most basic form of this is sorry, I can't even think in, so it's going to be the beginning, the middle, and the end, right? Please do not worry about going in order. When I was developing my novel, I certainly didn't have it in order. So when you're developing a tentative plot, it doesn't work in a linear way. Creativity doesn't work in a linear fashion where it's from step 1, 2, 3, 4. No, it really goes all over the place. And if anything, it's more of, it kind of like moves in cycles and waves. So maybe if you're lucky, you go in order and you know the beginning, middle, and end of your story. But if not, that's okay. Just be patient and continue to develop that, which we'll talk about in the next step. So another thing that might come to mind, perhaps, is something like okay, so this is interesting. So a prologue, which I'll make a separate video for. Maybe in your tentative plot, one of the things you know for sure that you want to include is a prologue. A prologue is basically something that occurs before the actual chapters begin, and it works usually as a cliffhanger, but it does show high tension and something really suspenseful and interesting, and it makes the reader want to actually continue reading. Actually start the story. So maybe you start with the prologue. Maybe that's part of the plot that you have in your head. Maybe in your head, you actually have visions, or just, you're able to visualize what's going on in the climax, which is the most sort of like epic, intense part of the entire story that everything is leading up to. Maybe that comes into your mind at first. So again, this is just tentative. When it comes to especially things like the nitty-gritty details, my tip for you guys is to not be too attached to anything, because you will see that things will morph and evolve over time as you evolve. So try not to be married to any one particular thing. However, you are going to have these recurring visions or inspirations that you know for sure you want to include, and I will reference that in the exercise at the end of the steps here. So with the tentative plot, to kind of expand upon the notion of character or characters, part of the plot is the obstacles that the character is going to be encountering. So conflict, right? So part of what happens in the story is naturally going to be things like conflict. And if you don't have conflict, you don't really have much of a story. Try to remember that fiction or any kind of story is going to mirror our journey of life. And we start off in the beginning of our lives. We have these dreams and these desires and these wants. We work to get those things. We become a full and developed person with, we grow very resilient over time because of conflict, because of our struggles, and because of overcoming and conquering those struggles. That's a story. Okay, so this is something that will occur naturally. Try not to add in conflict to your plot for the sake of conflict itself. It has to be something that makes sense and that fits and that resonates with the characters and their world, is what I wanted to say for that one. Okay, so more of the plot. You can also just develop their world a little bit more. Maybe you can just envision the type of world that they're in. That will, again, we'll do separate videos for that one. I'm just trying to see what else I have here. Okay, so the tentative plot, you can think of this as, I guess, the skeleton. That's how it's often referred to. So we're talking about just the bones of the story. Do not worry about details in this stage. If you're currently establishing a tentative plot, just the outline, don't worry about all of the nitty-gritty details here, because the whole purpose of an outline is to just have a simple view of the book itself. Don't put too much pressure on yourself is really what I'm saying. Okay, so you're going to have that. You're going to have the skeleton, the bones. Then the next step, we're going to focus on a little bit more of detail. So I hope that this all makes sense. So the next step is to fine-tune your outline. So basically develop the outline. So everything that I just talked about here is it's exactly the same, but adding more detail and more fleshing out of everything that's going on. And hopefully, yes, by then you will have established some form of a beginning, middle, and end. But if not, again, it takes patience. Develop your visions, all right? So yes, fine-tuning your outline. This is like the meat on the bones. I don't know if I even want to write that, but I will just for a visual sake. So the meat, and this is the details. Developing the world, the characters, everything, okay? And this can really take the longest, okay? So I remember that I was, oh my gosh, I was fine-tuning my outline for years and years and years and years. And remember that it evolves with you. So this is where you want to really pour your heart and soul into in terms of developing the world and the characters, backgrounds. Try not to include anything about like fluff. Everything matters. Everything is significant. So I would probably, another way I would word this is that you're exploring the world. You're exploring the characters. You're exploring their inner world as well. And again, separate video for that one. Make sure that you spend ample time doing this stage. This is pretty much going to be the bulk of your book, right? And another thing that I just wanted to add down here, develop your visions. So I think that in some of my earlier videos, try to check out all my videos because I don't have many, but I do have some tips there. The first 4 videos or so of my channel here, where I talk about some ways to become inspired. So in my personal case, something that helped me to develop my visions over time was music, instrumental music, and just kind of allowing my mind's eye to go crazy and flexing that muscle almost every day. And so this developing your visions, again, this can take time, take patience, but it will come to you. So again, try to, as I said in a different video, try to write from the space of your heart, write because you love it, because you're passionate about it. Try not to get too caught up in the overanalyzing, which happens in the brain, right from the space of your heart and your soul, if that makes sense to you guys, okay? So the next stage, this is going to be a little bit tricky here, but it's well worth it. This is where you're going to start developing your chapters. So the whole book, it's very intimidating if we're thinking about writing a book that's hundreds of pages, right? This is a lot. It's a lot of pressure. The key in developing chapters and working on your book and actually achieving this journey is the ability to break it down, to chunk things. So if we chunk things, there's actually a science behind this, that the brain succeeds more when it's able to chunk information basically into more manageable units. So if you're trying to write a book from start to finish, like without, any kind of breaking it down at all, bless you, because I don't think I could ever do that in a million years. So I have developed over the years, I've just kind of come up with my own ways to organize my information and to break things down. And I'll share some of those with you now, but again, a separate video for some of the steps here. And I'll be glad to share some of the templates that I created with you guys so that your chapter development process is easier. Okay, so in starting to develop your chapters, I would probably say if you're looking at the entirety of the book, I don't have a great example now, but let's say that this is representing a whole book, maybe the first way that you're going to break it down is in 3 sections. So just to break it down, some people break it down into parts, you don't have to do this, but it can be helpful. So like part 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. This is very obvious in books such as self-help because they actually have different sections. I have seen this plenty of times in novels as well, that they break it into parts. You can do this in any way that you want. Some people include quotes in part 1, 2, 3, like whatever it is. Some people jump around in timelines, which is really fun, actually. A little bit of an advanced technique, another video for that. So once you've established sort of like that direction, and maybe you do want to separate it into different parts and sections, that's great. If not, that's fine as well. Then if you can, so I do not recommend to split it up and break it down in terms of counting your chapters. That I don't recommend. Now, next, I will provide for you a simple index card method that I have used over time, that I've basically just developed over time, and it helped me immensely. This is one way that you can start to break down chapters. So let's say, for argument's sake, that you did break it down, just as an example, into 10 chapters, okay? So there you have instead of just this whole intimidating book with all this pressure, you have chapter 1, 2, 3, and then it goes through as many as you need it to be. Now you're looking at just one chapter. Now the key is to break down this chapter into manageable sections. The way that I personally do this is to use titles. So this works for each of the 10 chapters, of course. Again, you don't have to do this, but that personally helped me. Let's say that you use this method, you don't have to actually include the title. So it's really your preference. So let's say that you come up with a beautiful title for each of the chapters that resonates with you, that's meaningful to you. The title, the first chapter of my novel, it's titled Childhood Friends. Now, in my case, this is sort of containing the theme, right? So let me actually write that down. Contains, oh gosh, I can never do this. Contains the themes of whatever it is that you're working on, right? So my chapter 1 was titled Childhood Friends. So the reason for this is because all of chapter 1 was talking about memories from childhood, and mine is a psycho thriller, so it was actually talking about trauma from childhood that was all coming back in the first chapter. Okay, so the title for the whole chapter, it works for that reason. But then when you break it down, my trick for myself was to title the sections, and that really, really helped, okay? So I'm going to just write that down here. Title the sections. So in terms of sections, you can do this in any way that you want, right? So let's say that you're breaking down one chapter into 5 sections. My only recommendation is that for each of the sections, obviously you want each section to be related and relevant and go from like, point A to point B and have a cohesive flow to it, right? So for example, you can use setting as an example. So in my chapter 1, it first technically opens with a nightmare sequence, which is in itself one section, or I used to call them cuts, which that's just my thing. That's one section. I titled that, whatever you want to call it. You can say the dream or the nightmare, right? That could be a title. It's not anything fancy, but it is a way to contain the theme, the energy, or the information of just that one section, okay? So then after that sequence ends, it starts with something different, and then you title that, okay? And then once that ends, maybe even the setting changes, then you title that, okay? Again, you don't have to show the titles. That would actually be a little weird if you did, but it's for your own personal sort of information. It's just for you, for your inspiration. So again, the titles don't have to be fancy. They could just be almost like labels, but I like to make them mean something. So that's just my thing that I like to do. Okay, so we have parts titling the chapters that contains the themes, and then breaking up that chapter to include more sections that all have their own kind of self-contained theme, energy, information, or setting. Anything like that, okay? So let me go through that example again. Mine opened up with a nightmare sequence. I titled that something. And I'm only not saying it because it's like my baby. Like I just have a thing about that. Then the next one, it morphed into the setting of his bedroom, and something happened there. So I titled that there. Then after that, he goes up to a different area of the place, and it's like a lobby or something like that he enters. So I titled that. Okay, so we wanna contain each part. So the reason why I found this helpful was because I was able to focus on sometimes a paragraph at a time, or like a half a page at a time. Way more doable than a gigantic chapter or book. So I hope that you find that helpful. Okay, so we're chunking, we're organizing. Stay organized, okay, if possible. I completely was an index card hoarder. You can use binders, you can use different colored notebooks. Now, as you can see here, and again, I will share the exercise in a few moments. This is an example of the different colored index cards. These are blank, but over the years, I used so many, and I have a habit of sticking things on my wall so I can see it visually. The advantage of using multicolored index cards is that you can use a different color card for different things, such as maybe yellow is following this character, maybe blue is following another character, and vice, and so on. Maybe each of the different colors represent a different timeline that you're doing, if you're doing a non-chronological timeline. Okay. So color coding is really, really helpful. And if you don't want to worry about organization in that detailed and specific way yet, of course, you can use blank index cards. So just to keep yourself organized. And again, binders are really helpful as well. Different colored notebooks I definitely utilized. Like my favorite color, my favorite character, his color notebook was purple. You know, just your preference again. So staying organized really helps. And what else for developing the chapters? So there is one little kind of asterisk here that I kept in mind. I have read that different publishing companies sometimes require different lengths of books. I pay no attention to that because I'm just like a rebel. But do keep in mind that if you're going to if you're planning to go to a publishing company one day, they will have certain requirements. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. You might want to do a little research there, okay? So I think what I'm going to do next is I'm going to provide for you the simple exercise using the index cards. You can use anything that you have at your access. You can even use PowerPoint, by the way. I'm just going to say PPT over here. PowerPoints to help to organize your information. It's very useful. You can use anything online, of course. So here is the exercise, and I actually forgot to make a slide for that, so I'm just going to insert this here. So here's the exercise. I'm just actually going to be showing you with this, and if I feel the need to type something, I will. All right, so for this, you can use a nice, fresh pack of index cards, blank index cards, or you can use Post-its, anything at all that I recommend that you can stick on the wall. Okay, so here's the exercise. So, clear your mind and have a clear space in front of you, ideally a clear table or anything that you can use. The whole point of this is to focus on your book, focus on the visions, focus on anything that you are passionate about within this book, and just allow these images to come to your mind, or ideas, or sound bites, dialogue, anything like this. Now take a Sharpie or a pen. I like to use Sharpie, even though I don't have it right now. Take a Sharpie or a pen, and what will go on each index card will be anything at all, anything at all that you know will definitely be included in your book. Anything. It could be something as big as a chapter, something as small as literally one line of dialogue or narrative, or basically just a summary. It doesn't have to be an actual specific thing, but something you know for sure will be included in your novel, okay? So you're going to write that down. You're going to say, okay, this happens, this scene happens. I see that this happens with this character and they encounter this person, you know, and then you set that down. Then you go through another one and you say, oh, I definitely know that at some point in the book, this person says this. I definitely know that this is going to happen, and like, you know, this scene comes into this, you know, you get the point. So the whole point is to burn through all of the different imagery and the different words and the different information, anything at all, topics even, that you know for sure must go in the book. Now, you're going to have a whole stack of different things. Do not worry about the order or any of that pressure at all. Then when you're finished, that's when you're going to organize it, okay? As best as you can. You're going to put it in sequence, put it in order as best you can. What I did was I taped the index cards to the wall because I'm a visual person. I taped them to the wall and then I kind of rearranged them. I was really just trying to understand what I was looking at, but that was something very simple that I worried about the structure and organization and detail later. But just having that helped me to create my skeleton, which is what we talked about in step 3. Okay, so no pressure with this, technique, and just really go with the flow. And then this one was the tentative one, the early preliminary one. And then when you are ready, you get the big boys out with the colored index cards. This is where you can begin to title the chapters on the top. You can write the summary here. This can be for characters. Again, you don't have to follow exactly what I'm doing, but these methods helped me, and I just came up with them over time. They helped me, and I hope that they can help you too. So everyone, writers, storytellers, creative people out there, that's what I have for you for this video. I will link the relevant videos in the description and in the comments from the ones I've already filmed and the ones that I will create later, depending on when you're watching this, okay? In the description, I also have another new excerpt of mine. I've also included in the description my other channel as well as my Instagram, just in case you're interested. I thank you guys for being here. Good luck on your writing journeys, and I will see you next time, okay? Take care. Bye-bye.